You are listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my regular weekly guests, and we are all here to share the research, the science, and the strategies, as well as some of the fun, to help you to create a more active life. Hello, and welcome to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my guest, Rachel Hubbard. Rachel, like me, has been in the industry for quite a long time. So we've seen many changes. We've seen many fads, trends and all sorts. But what we're talking about today is perimenopause and activity. So Rachel, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and then we'll go into it?
Well, I was one of the people who was totally inspired to do aerobics by watching Jane Fonda. And I used to be a keen basketball player, and I used to play in Glossop Ladies. And whilst we were training in the gym, I used to be watching a young Cherry Baker teaching aerobics and kept thinking, like, why can't I do some of that? And when I moved back home to Aberystwyth, there was no basketball for women. And I went to an aerobics session in a sports centre. I'm getting to the point. And there was none. The only one that had it was in the squash club. So you'd go to the squash club and there'd be a bar area, complete with bar and men having pints around the bar. And they clear the tables and all these girls would do aerobics. And I was thinking, like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to go and get trained. So I went back to Glossop and worked with another Sarah and got qualified. And the rest is history. And I think, like you know, I've had this long career of having a passion for fitness and being active. And then I got into teaching for Fitness Wales. Then I went to the YMCA. I was a course director of the YMCA for 10 years, working on ETM and gym. And then I went back to Fitness Wales and developed then up to level 2, level 3, level 4, developed a back care course. And during all of this time, never ever once in any of the teaching that I did with the YMCA, whether it's on GP referral, whether it was on back care, was menopause ever mentioned. But when I was about 47, I was completing my degree in sports science, and you have to do a dissertation to get an honours degree. And I had a lot of customers, either in my classes or personal trainers, who were getting to the menopause going like, Rachel, just you wait till this happens to you. You have no idea how bad it is. And I was going, yeah. Didn't think anything of it. And I was thinking, like, this is such a big issue now. I'm going to do my dissertation on how do I get people in the menopause to exercise? So this was back in 2009. And at the time, there wasn't masses of information about menopause. And I look back and I'm quite embarrassed about my dissertation because I approached it from a psychological point of view. So I did the self-determination theory of motivation to exercise for peri and postmenopausal women. And I lost marks on it. And I was really cross I lost marks on it. But she said, you didn't put enough information about menopause in it. And then I had the menopause.
Yeah.
That was a game changer. I had the menopause following ovarian cancer. I had a burst of ovarian cysts and they found stage 1 cancer. So I had total hysterectomy. So at the age of 51, I went through a very quick menopause. And it completely devastated me, both physically and mentally, and went through a real trauma. And then I was going, hang on, I did this in my dissertation. There must be more. There must be more to this. And so I started to have a look at self-healing because then COVID happened and, you know, I was on my own and I had time to revisit my dissertation and suddenly thought, why aren't more people doing stuff about menopause? And so I've had a fitness in kind of career where I've been fascinated by being active, but also a bit shocked that as a fitness industry, we still don't address this issue. But the more I looked into it, did you know, Sarah, that 41% of all medical courses for doctors in this country
Really? That's quite shocking, isn't it? Because it's something that, let's face it, women go through. It's inevitable.
But that's the thing, you know, if you're pregnant, it's a choice. You know, some people can't get pregnant for sure. Some people don't want to have babies, but there's lots of protocols in place. Yet every single woman will have the menopause.
That's it. And for some, it's much earlier, you know, for whatever reason. Like you say, if some of the cancer treatments will put women into a premature or very early menopause and a sudden one. But at some point, everyone is going to go through it. Every woman is going to go through it. And yeah, you're right. It's. I mean, even I'm a graduate of YMCA Fit and also Fitness Wales like you. We've kind of followed each other around, but I taught on the older adult course for many, many, many years, and it was barely touched on. Some of the impacts of getting older were touched on, but not menopause itself. And you would think that even in a dedicated older adult course, it would be covered.
You know, when you look back at the osteoporosis courses, right? And I've revisited osteoporosis. One of the biggest game changers for osteoporosis is menopause. And we kind of bracket it into getting older rather than having no estrogen. And I think that when you start to understand the impact of menopause on bone health, let alone cognitive health, it makes you suddenly realize the importance that we have to put on training people to become stronger, because, you know, we are at such a disadvantage when we've gone through menopause.
That's it, isn't it?
That has long-term health.
The good thing is it is starting to be included, it's starting to be covered, and there are more dedicated courses for it. But for me, it's something that should be included on all courses. Even things like exercise referral. I know menopause isn't a medical condition as such, but it is a medical process. So something to definitely be considered alongside a lot of the other conditions that are more common as women get older. But so we've mentioned menopause and perimenopause. What's the actual difference between the two?
It's quite. Let's start with the fact that most people don't even know what menopause is. And you know, they think at the moment there's about 13 million women in the UK who are going through the perimenopause, and it can be kind of defined, if you want, like the scientific definition is the absence of menstruation for more than 12 months in women over the age of 35. But the transitional period between the menopause starts when you haven't had a period for 12 months. Your perimenopause is any time over the age of 35 up until that point. The minute you've stopped having your period, you're menopausal. Or you're postmenopausal. And the perimenopause are the years where your estrogen diminishes slowly and you start to see this transition. And it can happen as early as 30-year-olds, okay? But, you know, it just depends on your genetics, your family history, your diet, nutrition, all these different kinds of aspects. 51 is considered to be the average age that most women have got to postmenopause, and everybody's finished the menopause by the age of 60. Some people don't know because they stay on the pill and they have no idea. But most people have no idea that they're going through the menopause. Bupa did a really interesting study, as you say, because it's more thing, and they found that 1 in 10 women didn't know they were menopausal, and 45% of those women didn't go to the GP for their symptoms, or they were too embarrassed to go to their GP. And when they went to their GP, the GP was referring them for depression, fibromyalgia, early onset dementia, arthritis, anything like that, high blood pressure, without even considering the menopause. So it's a good question, because if we don't know what the perimenopause is and doctors don't know, this is why women get very stressed, because they think it's something wrong with them. You know, what is wrong with me? I'm tired all the time, you know, I can't think straight. And it's a gradual process. So unless you've had, like you say, chemotherapy where your ovaries are destroyed, or a surgical intervention where the ovaries are removed, either one or two, you'll just kind of think it's your fault somehow. And
this is one of the issues, isn't it? For a lot of women, it's kind of almost, it's just because I'm getting older. People accept it as an inevitable and untreatable thing. It's because I'm getting older. It's just because of this and that. And so they don't go to the doctor because they don't think there's any point. But for a lot of women, there's a huge point, because it's not necessarily depression. And I know a friend of mine's just gone through horrendous symptoms and was fobbed off because they said, oh, you're too young for HRT, and eventually went private, got HRT, and it was a game changer for her, absolute game changer. I'm not saying HRT is necessarily the answer, but for a lot of women, they're not even given the option and the information that they need. So what actually happens in our bodies then within the menopause or perimenopause?
Do you know what? There's no reason. There's one reason why we can't work it out, because there are actually more than 30 symptoms that are, classified as perimenopausal. But what I would go back to is talking about when we have menstruation. So if you think about the menstrual cycles that we have, estrogen rises so that we get, the egg to release in order for us to get pregnant. And then after that phase, estrogen starts to diminish. And just before we start our period, the estrogen levels in our bodies drop down low. And we get all these kind of premenstrual syndromes. So things like sore breasts, tired, wanting to eat sugar, feeling irritable, that time of the month kind of feeling. That's perimenopause every day for like 5 years. Because it's the same kind of process. So when estrogen drops down, it has direct impact on our bodily functions. But really the top kind of things that people complain about is brain fog. Okay. It's one of the top complaints. People go into a room, don't know why they're there, can't remember where they've put their keys, forget about meetings, meet somebody they know, can't remember their name, forget their password, can't park the car. It's like you kind of think like, what is going on? I can't remember these things. The thing that drives people to the doctors mostly, though, are the hot flushes. So hot flushes are not everybody has hot flushes. And so that's why a lot of people think like, well, I don't have any hot flushes. I'm not going through the menopause, but there are so many other ones. And, a hot flush is where your skin temperature rises around 5 to 6 degrees, and you get this massive flood of blood to the skin, as you do when you exercise. And certainly when I was having a hot flush, I felt like I was having a hard workout. And then in order to cool you down, your body then sweats, which is great. But that whole process of bringing the blood to the skin surface and then having to cool it down by sweating reduces the amount of blood that goes to the brain. And if you're having 3 or 4 hot flushes a day, it's no wonder you have brain fog. And there's little kind of like physical or psychomotor things that happen. So the night sweats tend to follow the hot flushes because we don't notice we're getting hot in bed. And you can be soaking wet, the sheets are wet, you're wet. But also difficulty sleeping, you can't get to sleep, you're feeling anxious, your thoughts are going around. And certainly when I had the menopause, I can remember staying awake for 24 hours. I was just thinking like, this is just ridiculous. You get all, the symptoms of PMT, bloating, your breasts become sore, you start putting on weight, your joints start to hurt. But you also get this rage. This like, the Incredible Hulk kind of rage. And it's a really interesting kind of like super PMT thing. And like PMT, you'll also find that you'll get very irregular periods. So you might miss a period, then you'll have an extremely heavy period where, you're bleeding maybe 4 times heavier than you would do normally. And then next month is hardly anything. And sometimes you can go 2 or 3 months, no period, then a heavy period. Or sometimes, it's just an irregular kind of thing. You tend to have more urine infections. You tend to be very dry down below, as they say. You have a lower libido. You have more headaches. You have migraines. Menopause for me triggered migraines so bad I now can't eat red meat. just annoying. But your hair thins. You can have like electric shocks in your fingers. Your gums start bleeding. You get itchy skin. You get anxiety. Your nails start breaking. You have stress incontinence, you have increased urge incontinence, you might notice increased BO. You might also notice that you're slightly more allergic to things that you've been used to. Maybe it's like you get hay fever and you've never had hay fever, or you suddenly become allergic to your washing powder, and a basic irritability. And I think there's that lovely kind of meme of the seven dwarves going itchy, bitchy, sweaty. That's about it. And it's no wonder that women don't recognize it. If they're very similar to PMS signs, then you're probably thinking, like, it's probably something you're quite familiar with, but it's like an intense version of that. And that can continue between 6 and 10
So
years.
anyone younger who's listening to this, all you younger women, this is what you've got to look forward to. I think I was quite lucky in that didn't really realise I'd gone through menopause until I was asked when my last period was, and I went, oh, crikey, it must. And I backtracked, and it was about 3 years before. But looking back, there were signs and symptoms, but I just put them down to being stressed or unusual and things like that. And I was very active at the time, and I was very busy. So, perhaps I didn't notice as much. But, if I'd known then what I know now, I'd have been much more aware of it. Mm. So I don't know if me being very active helped, but how does exercise help us during the perimenopause?
Exercise is of massive benefit. To anybody. But in particular, in the menopause, it helps us deal with some of the more challenges. So, for example, if I talked about hot flush. So if we have a look at hot flush, there's some really interesting work in, I said, like, I felt like I was having a workout, that kind of thing, where they found that people who exercise regularly had a reduction in the severity of a hot flush because their bodies were more used to dealing with getting hot and cooling down with sweating. On the flip side of that, what they found was that women who exercised at a high intensity actually made hot flushes worse. So there's a kind of value in kind of doing general level exercise to keep your body used to getting hot and cooling down, improving your thermoregulatory and vascular function, and keeping that blood flow going through to your brain. So that cerebral blood flow that we talked about. So when we exercise, remember, you know this, Sarah, but this is for the listeners out there. If we think about transporting oxygen to our muscles and we only have a few vessels to do that, then it's like a clogged motorway. But if we have many blood vessels, you have that kind of floodplain effect where you can distribute a huge amount of blood through the muscle. But it happens to the brain as well. So you have that improved kind of network of blood flow transporting oxygen to the brain, so that when you have that reduction in oxygen when you're having a hot flush, your body is better able to deal with it. And what's really interesting is that you can do different types of exercise. So we know that resistance training can have a positive effect on our cardiovascular fitness, in particular to the strength of our left ventricle, which is the main pump around the heart. But it also has a huge effect on the transportation of oxygen throughout the body. So even kind of small instances of resistance training alongside cardiovascular trainings will help our blood distribute oxygen and help us cool down. It has a direct impact on what we're calling the epithelial cells, so things that the way that our body functions in our brain and in our gut, in the tissue, in the bone, in the liver, and the skin, and that can help us deal with the reduction in estrogen. There are so many important things for exercise. So, for example, if we have a look at this increase in intra-abdominal fat, where we get this change, and I'm sure all the ladies out there will say, my belly is getting fatter. There's no way that we can avoid this. So even slim women will have an increase of intra-abdominal fat starting from the menopause, perimenopause, and going through to the menopause. So anything that we can do to reduce that increase in fat will help protect our heart. So we're looking at cardiovascular disease. And this is why, again, if we go back to courses, it's so important that we address intra-abdominal fat and the way that we get an increased level of cholesterol during the menopause. Women who exercise in the menopause, okay, so whether you're perimenopausal or postmenopausal, cannot burn the same level of fat as before you were menopausal. You can do the same level of exercise at the same intensity, and you cannot access the same level of fat stores. So you burn less fat whilst you're exercising. So you have to be really creative in the way that you do address that. And so that's why, again, resistance training is becoming far more important, because we want to increase our lean muscle mass to help our metabolic issues.
Presumably as well, it's why having a more active lifestyle helps, because then you're promoting that. So even though it's not structured exercise as such, that active lifestyle is providing more opportunity for your body to burn fat, to get fitter, to stay stronger.
And if we talk about staying stronger, and we talk about loss of muscle mass, and we think like it's a natural aging process, but in terms of osteoporosis, this young perimenopausal stage is so important for us before we get to menopause, that we do include some kind of weight-bearing exercise. Now, if you're talking about an active lifestyle, we can look at the low-impact things such as walking. But, we also need to think about introducing some kind of impact work into our bodies when we're being active. As we hit menopause, estrogen is the driver for the bone cell to grow. All right. So in the bone marrow, where we have the stem cells for bone tissue to be grown and then used in the bone, that stops. That stops completely when there's no estrogen. So when you're in menopausal, that is it. That is your end of your bone mass growth, unless you weight train heavily and have a good diet. So perimenopausal phases is so crucial that we get as much bone mass as we can when we're in our 20s, when we're in our 30s, so that as we approach the menopause now, we are in a better position. HRT influences our body's ability to create more osteoblasts, but without HRT, you can have some influence with exercise, but really it's this perimenopausal phase where we really need to get in the gym.
And that's the problem, isn't it? So many people wait until they're experiencing the symptoms and then start to do something about it. But it's kind of, do it as soon as possible. Really, we need to be promoting this, as I say, not just on things like the older adult courses, but we need to be promoting it on every gym course, on every personal trainer course, referral courses, is the importance of resistance training for young women as well as mid-adult and older women. It needs to be throughout the life cycle, not just when you're approaching menopause.
You might have seen I had a little bit of a rant this week because, I think people are kind of understanding now, osteoporosis in terms of costs. 90% of all orthopedic beds in the UK
really
are due to osteoporosis fractures.
Wow.
You're like, and the scary fact that your life expectancy is reduced by 30% if you have a hip fracture over the age of 65. And that means within 1 year, you're more likely to die from a hip fracture. And that's because once you're immobile, you haven't got any kind of, you're not keeping your heart healthy, you're not keeping your muscles strong. And so your body then can't cope with the stress of being still. So the perimenopausal phase is crucial that we're active, that we take steps to eat well, that we include resistance training. And my rant this week is that the BBC posted, I think it was a government report on the value of weight training. And then once again, they're showing women lifting a teeny weeny pink dumbbell. And I'm going for goodness sake, women bend down and pick up toddlers or, pick up the shopping. I think they weigh more than 1 kg.
I was going to say most women's handbags weigh more than a kilogram, but also every time you stand up, you're lifting kind of 2/3 of your body weight through your legs, and yet we'll see people, with these tiny little dumbbells doing squats, and you think, but you're already capable of lifting much more. I think we underestimate the amount of weight we can lift. And it always used to shock me that people would go for these tiny little weights. And you just think, but you're not going to walk out of here like an Arnie, all muscle bound, just from using appropriate weights, but you will walk out with stronger arms and legs and body. Yeah.
But it's almost like a microaggression, because we're taught, women can't lift as much weight, and then all of a sudden we've taken that kind of phrase to being that women are weak, and it's like somebody helping to carry your bags is seen as gentlemanly. Carry your own bags
up and downstairs.
Let's get rid of this, this kind of misogynistic viewpoint that women are not capable of lifting heavy weights or going to the gym or doing any kind of exercise where they're pushing themselves and grunting, that we only have to glow and we don't have to sweat. It's just rubbish.
My daughter-in-law, Erica, if you're listening, shout out for Erica, but she lifts the most incredibly heavy weights, and she's as lean as you like, but boy, is she strong. So, you don't necessarily bulk up like I think people assume you will, but we need to be promoting appropriate images of women lifting realistic weights, because let's face it, your shopping weighs more than a kilo. If you're buying, most oh no, it does frustrate me, actually. It really does, because I think the images, particularly of older adults, it's all smiley, let's go for a walk. Well, go for a run, go for a jog.
Let's go for a walk.
We need to be pushing an active lifestyle, but also an appropriate approach to exercise, because
if women knew their life expectancy is reduced because of not exercising, then instead of buying supplements for collagen, you might kind of go actually, I'd be better off buying a gym membership and going to the gym. But some of the weight training issues, I think that there's some really interesting studies that they've done in nursing homes, where they've gone in to see people who are, in a controlled environment, so that they can monitor them, but starting age of 75 plus, and they've given them weight training and got them to deadlift their own body weight. And the test that they used was they had to walk down a corridor holding a teacup and a saucer.
Yeah.
And like when you're old and it wobbles and you spill the tea, or like you're in a Zimmer frame, you can't do that. That's like a basics. And after this 12-month training program, they could all walk down the corridor holding a cup of tea, so that it's never too late to start weight training. You might not increase your bone mass, but you can reduce the amount that you're losing.
It's so important, isn't it? And it's a message that we need to be getting across, that, you are never too old to start exercising, but you are always too young to stop. Yeah.
Always. And there needs to be a real shift in the messaging that we're giving out there to females, that you are strong and you are capable and you are powerful, and you really don't have to conform to this societal norm of having to be nurtured and cherished and kept in cotton wool, because in the long term that's not going to do you any favors. We haven't really discussed dementia and the effect of dementia. But cognitive health for me is so super important. The perimenopausal phase of getting that increased, grey matter in your brain through being active, and the effect of, exercise on our telomeres. Should we talk about telomeres?
Well, I'm just looking at time. I definitely think we have another episode to do on this. So maybe talking. I think I'd love you to come back on and talk much more about some of the cognitive impacts. And how exercise can help, because I think we could end up with a much longer episode otherwise, which is not what it's all about. But we can talk about telomeres very briefly, but I think that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, I think let's keep it for that, because it's quite complex, and I think if people could suddenly understand, this kind of not remembering names, and that you don't have to accept it as that is it. That you can kind of say, well, let's make a change, and let's make a change, because if we're saying that 77% of women are experiencing difficulties with going through the menopause, and yet only 40% are going to the doctors. And of that 40%, only 14% are having treatment. We need to have that shift, and we need to take responsibility to exercise, be active, eat well, reduce our kind of sugar consumption, increase our protein and plant-based food, so that we are hitting the menopause in the best.
And that's it, possible. Isn't it? It's something that we need an awful lot more education and understanding around this. But more importantly, we need women to actually put their hands up and ask for help, ask for support, ask for advice. So, all you women out there, and men, if you're a man and you've got any women in your life whatsoever, start spreading the message that, menopause matters, but it doesn't matter at the age of 50, 51. It matters from 25 on. Well, it's a lifelong thing to think about, isn't it? And of course, we're a nation where we kind of wait for things to happen and then we fix them rather than putting things in place to prevent or ameliorate them in advance. We need so much more discussion as well about this.
And I think that, where you said, like, I wasn't sure, but looking back, I can see I must have been going because you feel better about yourself now. The shocking statistic is that women aged 45 to 54, so in that perimenopausal age, it's the highest female suicide rate.
And I think a lot of it, and so many issues that phase brings on, because I've spoken to women who say I honestly thought I was going mad. I honestly thought there was something hugely wrong with me, and it was only when I got appropriate advice that I realised that this was common and that I didn't have to feel that way. But how many people don't ask for advice because they don't want to admit to the way they're feeling? They don't want to be judged. Rachel, I think we could talk. We are going to talk again about this because I think it is a huge issue, and I think it's one that anyone listening will need. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, non-binary, whatever. Either you or somebody is going to go through this, and the more information and understanding we've got, the more people will talk about it, and the more people that will get help at the time they need it. But thank you so much for coming on. Right. Where can people find out more about what you do?
Pleasure.
I will put all the links in the notes, by the way, but where can people find you?
In the links in the notes, if you go to my webpage, I do a couple of things. So one, I have what's called a Cafe Menopause, where we have a series of talks like we're doing now, discussing some of the health issues, with then a series of online workouts that people can join in. Because I think that once you understand the information, you find that motivation. And I think, again, our fitness industry is quite guilty of promoting fitness in terms of looking better. Whereas as women, we should be promoting fitness as in protecting your health, so that you're not going to be, a burden on your family. You're not going to be facing old age, being ill. And that we are proactive in that. So please go to my website. If you like Facebook, I've got a Facebook page there where I post quite frequently about issues to do with menopause and other health things. I've posted something this morning just about creatine, about how creatine can help women through the menopause.
I saw that,
really
actually,
interesting information coming out about how it helps bone density and brain.
What's your actual website address?
www.rbhfitness.co.uk.
And I'll pop that and your Facebook page link in there. But thank you so much for coming along. And I've got one final question for you. What is your favourite activity?
Go on.
And why?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. And that's a hard question for me. I teach a selection of exercise classes in the week, but the one I really, really enjoy is the conditioning workout. And I've now changed it to Pilates conditioning. So we do a Pilates-based class using weights.
That sounds fab.
Yeah.
I like the idea of that.
That is fab. Slow exercise with weights is just
amazing. Because it's not stressful on the joints or anything, but using the weights slowly, as we could talk about that in much more depth, but using weights slowly is also a very positive bone health thing to do. So that sounds really, really good. So Guys, if you want any information about Rachel, as I say, you can follow her on Facebook or go to the website. And we will be back talking more about menopause and what we need to do. So talking about the cognitive impact, but also eat, sleep, diet, the lot. But thank you so much for coming along. This has been Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Bolaitho, and my guest, Rachel Hubbard. Diolch, Rachel.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you for listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Bolaitho, and my guest. Join me each week for more on how to create and sustain everyday activity, and follow me online at Fitness Career Mentor or Fabulous if you're interested in career development and more on creating active lifestyles.